What's happening, guys? Welcome to Jester Radio. Got a guest, another guest that can beat me up without even trying. So, Boyd Allen, bro, thank you so much for coming through. Professional boxer, made your debut in 2018 as a boxer, but then obviously before that, were you a professional MMA fighter as well?
Pro MMA for 8-9 years. I competed in mixed martial arts for about 11 years before I turned to pro boxing.
So I was watching an interview and it was actually someone was saying, it's the natural progression from where you were in your career to going into boxing. And it was why do you think it is a natural progression? Because obviously there's different, like they're both the pinnacle of, the fighting sport.
Yeah.
And, MMA, I think over the last few years has definitely come up to, obviously because the money is almost the same now as boxing.
Yeah, look, I think with regards to money and that, boxing's still way ahead of MMA, especially when you get to, fighting for world titles and things like that. Boxing's still at the pinnacle. But with regards to a natural progression, I don't think that's the way most fighters will go. I think guys will stick to their sport. I was really lucky in the sense that I had an amateur boxing background before I started MMA. So I kind of always loved striking, always loved boxing as a sport and as an art. So I became sort of stagnant in MMA. I was battling to get fighting once a year. And I was going through to Colin Nathan's gym and sparring with some of the guys there. And it was actually Lerena Liebenberg who said to me, why don't I try out my hand in pro boxing? And I thought, I didn't think I'd really be ready for it. I hadn't done it for so long. But I was doing reasonably well with the sparring and that type of thing. So I gave it a shot and sort of, just put myself out there, and it worked out. So got into the pro boxing world and, managed to do pretty well so far.
And you also, obviously, you jiu-jitsu. You coach jiu-jitsu, and then obviously, did you compete in jiu-jitsu or anything?
So I've competed in, I think, 2 jiu-jitsu competitions locally, but not really more than that. But I coach pretty much every day, morning and evening type of thing, at my gym, Apex. And I still go through to Richie Kwan at Fight Fit Militia. I do my MMA training there and my jiu-jitsu, that kind of thing. And then just do as much as I can all round, sort of mixing it up, kind of like a hybrid athlete.
And is there one, obviously now, more focused on boxing, but is there one, form of fighting, combat sport that you'd prefer? Like if there's one in particular?
I love both for what they are. They're both very different. I think mixed martial arts, you can be very creative and very free. There's lots of ways to finish a fight and there's lots of ways to lose a fight. Where boxing is boxing. If you're good at what you do and you're good at that specific art, you'll have success in the game. So I love boxing for what it is, and I love MMA for what it is. And I don't see any reason why people shouldn't or couldn't do both.
And that's also obviously your goal now. You're telling me before that you can hopefully, go into getting another MMA fight now to be able to, compete locally first before you can go overseas. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so I think with different opportunities arising, it's always nice to be able to do both sports. As we've seen internationally with guys like Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather.
Sorry to interrupt this podcast, guys, but Jester Radio is now sponsored by Nutricon. Nutricon is giving you all 20% off your final order. So if you want to go and, buy a pre-workout, protein shake, and, I don't know, creatine, if you want to look good, maybe you're interested in that kind of stuff. I know I am. But if you go and use the code JESSE, JESSE, plain, simple, you'll get 20% off. No, not 10% like other people might be giving you, 20% off. Nutricon has allowed me to give you guys 20% off your total order at checkout. Type in the code JESSE and you can get your 20% off discount. Sweet guys, thank you, and back to the podcast.
Being able to switch and go into pro boxing from a mixed martial arts point of view or vice versa. I think it just opens a lot more doors and a lot more opportunities, and as athletes, especially in South Africa, we need to be open to that.
Speaking of, Floyd Mayweather, how do you feel about these guys taking fights with YouTubers and, like Floyd Mayweather saying he's going to fight Logan Paul, Jake Paul calling out McGregor. Like, do you as a fighter, because obviously from, outside perspective might seem different, but for you as a fighter, do you think like, what are these kids doing here, like getting fights with these professional boxers with no experience?
Yeah, look, from a ranking point of view and actually working your way up to get to the top where you get sort of the right to fight guys like Mayweather or McGregor, for example, you should go through the process like most athletes have. But I mean, they're good at what they do. They're good at promoting themselves. They're good at business, and they're good at making money. So if that's how they're going to do it, and they're going to call out bigger names, then so be it. If they're really good at what they do and they make their themselves heard enough, then good for them. Like, I don't see why we need to sort of cry about it as athletes. If that's what's happening now, especially with social media and things like that, then we got to jump on that train and we got to do the same thing. It may not be in all of our personalities to sort of talk smack and call out big names and things like that, but he's got a following. He's got all the eyes on him, and he may as well use it while he can. Yeah. So a guy like Paul Logan, for example, calling out a Mayweather or McGregor, I think it's smart. I think, why not?
If you can get $1 million just for losing against the guy, who cares,
Yeah, look,
like that's their goal.
It's obviously never nice to lose, but I think it's also an exposure thing. He puts himself out there, and no one can really sort of frown upon it. He's never really done it before, and if he has, it's been at a very low level. And if you can have your first pro boxing fight like Conor did against Mayweather, why not fight the best in the world in your first fight?
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, and I think as athletes and as fighters specifically, we love challenges. That's why we compete in the sport that we do.
You're saying obviously it may not be in someone's nature to call people out and everything. In boxing, how important is that mindset of like, I'm the best? Even like, obviously there's fighters, some people don't do it, but like if you look at McGregor,
yeah.
He's I'm the best ever,
Yeah.
But then this latest fight, he didn't really call out Dustin. He was kind of more calm.
Yeah. So I think McGregor calmed down purely because the public started to dislike the way he was, and I think maybe took it a little bit overboard. But as an athlete and as a competitor, he's still right at the top, and he's right up there as one of the best in the world. What he accomplished in MMA changed the game for everybody. And once he made the crossover into boxing, a lot of other mixed martial artists went over into boxing, and that's kind of where I got the idea. It's thought, well, there are other mixed martial artists out there doing the same thing. Why don't I do exactly that? And I had the boxing experience from amateurs, so it made it a little bit easier.
And now you're trying to get a local fight?
So obviously just waiting on Golden Gloves and the promotion to let us know when events will sort of flow freely again, and then we can put ourselves out there and say, look, we're ready for a fight, and start getting back in there, staying active. But right now, I'm pretty lucky. My focus is on the gym and building the business. So I'm keeping myself busy regardless. I'm still training like I would as if I was fighting, but at the same time making sure everything's running smoothly with Apex.
That also obviously must have been difficult because, just before lockdown, 6 days before, your fight got cancelled, and then, your business has to close.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, how did you, keep sanity of, like, literally your profession and then also your income, or both of them being income and profession kind of just being locked down?
Yeah, look, I think as athletes, we're also pretty lucky. We've got a lot of guys that back us, sponsorships, things like that. So we didn't really have to worry too much about that. But, when starting a business, especially when starting in a new location, you want to put the time and effort in, and it wasn't just us, the whole country sort of suffered that way. So we just had to bite the bullet, buy our time, train as hard as what we could. And yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, you put in a whole camp, you're ready to go, and 6 days before the fight's off. But like I said, we all went through it. So yeah, we just have to sort of smile and carry on and get back to the grind.
We're talking about obviously, McGregor calming down and not being as arrogant and as like, I'm going to beat you. How are you in terms of your mindset towards fights?
So I'm not really that outspoken. I don't like to talk smack and that, because I don't see my opponents as an enemy. The fight is more about me and my performance and what I've put in and what I want out of it. But there's been a few fights where there's been a bit of animosity and a bit of a build-up with regards to smack talk and things like that. But I think most people know me as sort of quiet, and I stay away from that type of thing, which I think is better for everyone. I don't think my opponents have never really started that with me, and I just stay away from it completely. I get that promoters want to build the show and they want hype and that type of thing, but if that's not you, it's not you.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10, it's pretty much just to sell the fight.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's just about selling the tickets and building up interest. And in my mindset, people should want to watch you because they like your style, they like the way you perform, and that's why they'll tune in or they'll come to the events and they'll watch live, not because of how you speak.
For you now, let's say you had to have a fight now with no one in the crowd. How would that affect you in terms of being psyched, getting amped, so being able to fight?
The Super 4 final was quite weird in the sense that there was no crowd, and it didn't feel like you were walking out into a fight environment at all. It was kind of like a more mellow sparring session. So it's difficult to get switched on. It's difficult to have that energy behind you, and it's obviously always awesome having your support there. Hearing the people screaming for you and shouting for you and just being there because they want to support you.
I was watching Joe Rogan and Dustin. There was his interview, and he was saying it was actually nicer for him to go out into a fight with no audience, with as you come out, no one spilling their beer on you, no one shouting that you're going to get killed in the ring. And obviously, I think there's certain aspects that will benefit you, and there's certain aspects that obviously won't as well.
Yeah, I think with regards to that, you probably, depending on who you are, etc. I kind of switch off when I walk out. I don't really hear much. When I'm fighting, I listen to the corner as best I can. But that type of thing doesn't really put me off. And those guys that are screaming that have probably never been in that environment in their life, so they don't actually know what they're talking about. And
you growing up, have you always been in a combat sport?
No, so I was quite big into swimming when I was younger, and I raced off-road bikes, motocross, enduro, that type of thing. And then started chasing a pro rugby career. I was big into my rugby, absolutely loved it. And post-matric, I wanted to join the Royal Marines and sort of start a career there. And just never really had the opportunity to follow through with that. Because I had started amateur boxing here in South Africa and just wanted to pursue it. I fell in love with the sport. So I boxed as an amateur for 3 years from about 18 to 21 and turned to amateur MMA when I realized it was going to be really difficult to get into the pro scene in South African boxing at that stage. So for about a year, competed in amateur MMA before I turned pro in 2011 and joined EFC in 2012.
So now, obviously Josh, is he still your strength and conditioning coach?
Yes, yeah.
So when I had him on, he said that for him, his best and, the most difficult combat sport, and he thought the top tier at combat sport was wrestling.
Yeah.
From you and your perspective, what do you think?
No, I agree completely. I think wrestling is an absolute menace of a sport to grasp the concept of and then apply that concept. It's strength on strength, obviously, and the more techniques you know, the better you are at it. And from a physical point of view, as a man or woman, it's an extremely physically hard sport on the body. So if you've got a wrestling base with mixed martial arts, I think you're probably better off than a guy who's got a jiu-jitsu or a striking base, in my personal opinion.
And jiu-jitsu, that's very calculated. And
jiu-jitsu is grappling, so it's all the groundwork, submissions, holds, positions, that type of thing. Where wrestling is put the guy on his back and keep him there, and they're very good at doing that. They neutralize submissions and they sort of pin you and they ground and pound like Khabib does. So Khabib is the best at what he does, and his base is wrestling. We've got a few guys in South Africa that have, or from South Africa, like JP Base, Bukanya Masanyani. They've got great wrestling, and it's starting to show now internationally that they can keep up with the guys. Bukanya's an absolute superstar, and he's performing brilliantly in one championships. So guys are starting to see that a wrestling base is a really good base to have.
And would you say, obviously you had a striking base?
Yeah, so I came from obviously boxing, so I always liked the striking aspect of it, and I just sort of that was my rush. That was my adrenaline, was striking.
And is there, obviously you say wrestling is kind of coming up and showing the importance and the prevalence, from the South African guys as well going overseas. But, for you, what was obviously, would you use mainly boxing or would you use like Muay Thai, or like what mixture of?
Yeah, so once I joined Fight Fit Militia with Richie Kwan, he sort of changed my game completely from just being a sort of boxing striker with a little bit of like adversity when it comes to certain strikes. He completely opened up my game and gave me way more tools to use, obviously, in the combat arena. So started working on kicks, knees, clinch, elbows, that type of thing. And I sort of just fell in love with the creativity that comes with it.
And how do you think someone like Ben Askren now, because obviously he's more of like a wrestler,
Yeah.
and he's not a, you're seeing videos, he's like almost looks like a terrible striker.
Yeah.
You know, him going against Jake Paul, obviously Jake Paul now doesn't have any, like I think their fight's actually on the 16th of April.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jake Paul has no, well, he's got 3 fights in his life, 2 fights, whatever it has been. And I mean, he obviously, even though he is technically more of a striker, just by watching him, you know, Ben can obviously take a punch because he's been in the sport and he is being tried and tested. And, you know, that obviously, it's a big difference from someone, even if they're a terrible striker, they're still going to be far better than someone with no, you know, fighting history.
Yeah, I think experience is a killer in the ring. So you get in there with a guy who's got no experience, you feel different pressure immediately. And I think they're having a boxing fight, so it could go 50-50. Ben Askren is not the best striker in mixed martial arts. He's predominantly a wrestler. But, you know, if it were an MMA fight, you would put him on his back, and there's no ways Paul Logan would be able to get up and win the fight. But in a boxing fight, it could go either way. So it could be a lucky punch. It could be that Paul Logan is genuinely just a better striker than him. Or Ben Askren could show him up for the inexperience that he has and outstrike him completely.
In South Africa, you know, obviously overseas, everyone's just almost at a better advantage in terms of publicity, in terms of, you know, even just prize money for fights, for the amount of people in the audience. You know, how do you bring about, you know, more of a community within boxing, within MMA, you know, to get more people to the fights?
So I think, and like we've spoken about it quite a bit with coaches and teammates and that type of thing, and South Africans in general don't get behind it as much as, say, Americans. You know, you fight there and you compete, whether you win or lose, they back you, they support you. I think the main thing with South Africans is ego. They might not want to learn, or they just switch off to it completely. And only now are they starting to realize that it's something really fun to do, learn a combat sport like boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, mixed martial arts, whatever it is. And we live in a violent country where you need to learn a self-defense to protect yourself, just in case you get into a situation, which is a higher probability here than it is there. So I think now it's starting to grow. We've been going at it for 12 to 15 years, which is still a reasonably young sport in South Africa.
Well, I mean, you obviously having the gym, you see how many people, you know, you see the interest within being able to defend yourself. And, you know, obviously, have you seen it increase lately? You know, has business got better? Has, you know, the amount of people coming in wanting to sign up as a gym improved?
Yeah, so I think especially with COVID, there was a big increase in domestic violence, and we had quite a few women that were interested in learning a self-defense when it came to domestic abuse. And they want to learn something like boxing or jiu-jitsu, or something that just sort of builds their confidence so that they can sort of squash it before it starts. So yeah, we've had quite an increase in that regard. And you know, we like that. We like having women in the gym learning an art, learning a self-defense, because it softens everything. New guys will walk in and they go, hey, this is a place where everyone can train. It's not just a place for fighters and aggressive guys that just want to kill each other kind of thing. So yeah, we're very open to that, and we like to help, you know, when it comes to that type of situation.
And in terms of, you know, just out of interest's sake, you know, women coming into your gym, would they prefer to be coached by a female, or do they mind?
So a lot of women would prefer to be coached by females. So we've got female coaches. But a lot of women don't mind. They don't mind working with the guy. And eventually we sort of migrate them into training with a lot of the guys, especially with regards to jiu-jitsu. And we always tell them, at the end of the day, let's face it, it's not really a woman that's going to want to attack you. It's going to be a man. especially with gender-based violence. So learn how to deal with their physicality, learn how to deal with their strength. And we've got really sort of small, petite women that are absolute savages on the mat. And the new guys are like, they look at us shocked and they're going, how am I getting tapped by a woman? You know, so that's half my size, half my strength, whatever it is, until they realize this is an art and this is a sport that you need to learn before you can actually, you know, be good at it.
Yeah, I think it is also, it's an ego thing when a woman has, you know, more skills than you in any aspect. Like as a male, most males, obviously a lot of males don't, but there's a lot of males that kind of, you know, that's why men think that they have to earn more money and men think they have to do certain things. Yeah. You know, it might be misplaced, but men think that they need to be superior to a woman. So I think it must be quite interesting seeing these women that you've trained come and school these guys in, you know, in any discipline.
Yeah, I mean, we got a few ladies that are really good at what they do when it comes to jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts. And you can see the look in the guy's face when he realizes that this isn't just a pushover. You know, I'm going to have to actually work to get a tap or to land a punch or to get a takedown or whatever the case is. And all while he's trying to do that, they're doing exactly the same to him and they're getting it. So, yeah, it's quite cool to see. It's nice to see the confidence build up, and it's also nice to just sort of chat to them afterwards and go, you know, what are you learning from it? And they say to you, like, my confidence has gone through the roof. I know that if I was in a situation, I'd be able to handle myself. Or at least they hope they would be able to. You know, they're more confident when it comes to that.
Well, I think as a fighter in general, let's say, look, going into a fight, you need that confidence is going to help you so much more. Yeah. I think that's obviously why the trash talk also helps, because it builds your own confidence within yourself. And, you know, there's a certain level where you might actually not be as good as someone else in terms of fighting, but because you are more positive, because your mind is right going into it, you know, you could actually beat them.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen fights, you know, from way back when, where guys literally win the fight with their mouth before they do anything physical, before they even step into the ring, like a Muhammad Ali or Conor McGregor, for example. You know, they get into their opponent's head and they beat them before they even step in. So yeah, mental game is a big part of it. But like I say, you've got different guys that like that type of thing and guys that sort of switch off to it completely.
Yeah. I was actually having a debate with a friend the other day. So he had a falling out with one of his ex-friends. And the friend that he had a fallout with has a boxing background. And he's, you know, he's trained. Sorry about this, guys. So he's trained and... Okay, that's gone. So let me just turn it off. So, I mean, he's had actual training. I don't know, like let's say it was like 10 years of actual boxing experience. And then the friend said, no, it doesn't matter if he's had boxing experience. If it's a street fight, I'll win. You know, when it comes down to it, I'll win. And I don't agree with that, because regardless of, you know, the amount of experience you have, you know, when it comes to street fight, yes, it might not be, you know, as structured and formulated as a boxing match, but you're still going to have an upper hand having more experience.
No, definitely. I think once you've understood a little bit of combat and you understand what goes into it and you understand timing, range, you know exactly where to throw punches, how to land punches, and also what it feels like to actually do that on a daily basis, you're going to have a massive advantage when it comes to somebody that doesn't. You know, bigger, stronger, faster guys that have never done that will battle with a guy who's half their size that actually has the skill. And it is a skill, just like anything else. Once you have that skill, it's very difficult to forget it, and it will stay with you for the rest of your life. So when it comes to things like, you know, a fight outside of an actual arena, a guy with a mixed martial arts background or a boxing background, wrestling background, whatever it is going to have a massive advantage compared to the sort of general guy in the street.
How is that, you know, because obviously as a professional boxer, let's say you're not allowed to get in a fight outside the ring. How is that in terms of your mind, you know, knowing that you have to back down, but you wish you could just tell this person, like, bro, if we actually had to fight, I'd rock you?
So I think in the beginning of my career, it was frustrating because you knew that and you had to sort of hold back. But as you mature and as you go through with it, you kind of laugh it off. And, you know, if the situation does get too heated and you need to defend yourself, then you are allowed to defend yourself as a pro athlete. Yeah. So if someone were to hit you or attack you first, you can defend yourself. But to go out and look for trouble and look for fights and things like that, you'll lose your license, yeah.
Did you have like have you ever had like self-conscious issues in terms of who you are and who you are as a person? Like have you ever like had self-doubt? Every human kind of has it, but
Yeah.
did you like actively know like okay, like I've got an issue with self-doubt?
So I think as a youngster, I grew up I grew up in a sort of rough area and had to learn how to protect myself and not just myself but my family too. And I had to learn really quickly to get tough. And it wasn't really self-doubt, it was more just not understanding. Once I sort of started understanding what goes into these sports, that sort of gave me the confidence to pursue it. In the beginning, it was kind of like, well, do I go and look at a boxing gym and sort of get involved, or do I maybe just stay in the gym and get fit and sort of look good? And I think once I started adding in that sort of cross training with boxing and mixed martial arts, it does build your confidence, because you sort of, or not sort of, you soon realize exactly what you can and can't do. And that's also normally with guys in your weight division. Then you're talking about training with guys in a bigger weight division, and it gets way more difficult because those guys are bigger, faster, and they're just as skilled. So, and that's why they have weight divisions in fighting. So yeah, I think it does build your confidence, and it helped me a lot, if I'm being honest.
And how I know any person that is, let's say, a professional in something that they do, it gives them confidence in any aspect of life.
Yeah.
And I assume it's obviously with boxing, with fighting, because I mean, let's be real, fighting is the most animalistic thing a human can do. Like you can't, like, fighting is, every movie is about fighting, everything is about being physically superior and to be able to win in a fight. Does that give you confidence, not in an arrogant way, but just in a way like just in general confidence, like if anything had to happen, I'll be fine?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I speak for most fighters. You know exactly what you're capable of, and that confidence and that feeling is indescribable. You walk into a place and you can look after yourself. And like you say, it's not an arrogance thing, it's just what you've put yourself through that gives you that confidence. If you've studied for a test and you've done all the due diligence, you're going to do well and you're going to get a good mark. It's the same thing with fighting. You put in the work, you put in the hours, you're going to reap the rewards. Yes, you may not win a fight because the other guy might have put in a little bit more, or it just wasn't your night. But when it comes to general sort of self-defense and putting yourself out there, I think you are way more confident. And not just with guys, with girls too.
Yeah. And with, obviously making a change from MMA to boxing, is it, obviously the style of training is relatively different, but, the amount of sparring sessions, those kind of things with being in the ring, does it differ between MMA and boxing?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I've had the conversation with a few people, it's a completely different sport to MMA. You don't have to worry about kicks, knees, takedowns, clinch, position control, that type of thing. You need to worry about that guy's hands and sort of movements and angles. And if he's better than you in that regard, you're going to have a tough night. Where MMA, there's so many ways that you can sort of neutralize your opponent's skills. So if I know I'm fighting a guy who's really good on the ground, I need to work my takedown defense and make sure I keep it standing. Or vice versa, I know he's really good standing, so I'm going to take him down and try and submit him with submission, and or just put him on his back and make him really tired, so that when he does stand again, he doesn't have the gas to keep going and throwing bombs at you. So yeah, I think it's the sweet science.
And obviously, because MMA, he can do a lot more, he can throw a lot more at you. But with boxing, also, you still need you have to obviously concentrate as much, regardless if you're just watching two hands or watching his entire body. Your concentration levels, I assume, are still the same.
Yeah, so you obviously have to be extremely switched on and focused when you get in there. And from a boxing point of view, there's a lot more forward pressure, and the cardio is ridiculous. Obviously, you're fighting 12 3-minute rounds in boxing, where MMA at most you fight 5-minute rounds for a title fight, which is 25 minutes. So 36 minutes to 25 minutes makes a big difference, going that extra time, and you get into the later rounds, especially when you come up against an opponent who's maybe a bit stronger or just as strong. So yeah, it makes a big difference. from a damage perspective, MMA for me is probably a lot higher. Leg kicks, head kicks, knees, elbows, slams, things like that. Where boxing, you are wearing bigger gloves, but not to say you don't take damage. You take really hard shots and probably long term worse off with the impact than in MMA.
Would the obviously the impact you say from boxing, is that because it's more directional, more clinical, almost like for going for 1 point, whereas MMA could be like, okay, I'm just going to try land a kick.
So I think it's the glove. Having that cushion glove allows you to throw a punch and sort of not worry about your hand, where MMA you need to make sure that you're landing on the right spots at the right time, or you could break your hand, or it's just not going to have any effect at all. And with regards to kicks, a shin to the head is never nice. Leg kicks, calf kicks, we've seen even with the last McGregor fight, just a few calf kicks stops the guy. Guys don't realize what they can do to your leg and how painful it can be. Just kicking in the right spot, 3-4 kicks later, you can't stand on that leg. With boxing, it could be the same with regards to body shots. You work the body shots early on in the fight, and later on in the fight, that pays off, and the guy can't take the body shots anymore. His hands start to drop, and you land shots to the head, and obviously either gain points or you get the stoppage.
And then in terms of like strengthening your kicks, because obviously I assume you need to kick something harder than a bag, or you just kick a bag. Because I mean, obviously, like strengthen your shins. Can you imagine it's a difficult feat to be able to strengthen your shins?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sort of confusion about it, where you see guys on like YouTube videos strengthening their shins, hitting it with a pole or rolling a glass bottle on it, for example. Sort of old Muay Thai traditions, kicking banana trees, for example. But kicking the bags just as good, and obviously technical sparring and things like that with shin pads on. The more you do it, the more conditioned your body gets to it. So the same with anything. The more you run, the more you become conditioned to run. The more you kick, the more you become conditioned to kick and take kicks. So it's just about time on the mat or time in the ring or in the gym and putting the work in.
And now obviously trying to get another MMA fight. Is that going to, obviously because your endurance has maybe been improved from, more of a boxing little stint that you've had now for like, let's say the first 3 years or however long it's been. Yeah. Well, your kicks and everything might have, because I assume you haven't been training as MMA orientated, it's been boxing while you've been on this boxing spree. So now, do you think maybe it's going to benefit you having changed, or?
Yes, I think I have been training MMA still. I'm still training boxing as well. I haven't really been to my camp yet, where I trained out of for my last fight, but that's because I'm running the gym, and I like to be at the gym quite a bit. But I still train MMA every day, boxing every day, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. Obviously space it out accordingly, and we follow a program. But yeah, it is very different. Boxing from a fitness point of view has sort of opened my eyes to the cardio needed, and it will definitely help going into an MMA fight. As I said before, I'd like to be a hybrid athlete where I can switch between the two sports. But whatever fight comes, I'll take, So it's just about preparation. So we just make sure that we're constantly conditioned, and the only way we can do that is to constantly practice our sport.
Yeah. And obviously for you being a striking athlete, it's easier for you to make that change from MMA to boxing, where someone who's maybe just grappling and wrestling orientated might be more difficult for them to make the change. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of guys in MMA that have a clinch, wrestling and takedown sort of base and style, and that's what they like to do, and that's their process, and that's what their goal is when they get into the ring or the cage. With me, I like to be as creative as I can, and for me, that's striking. I enjoy striking. I think it's fun and it's a challenge. But not to say jiu-jitsu isn't, so all wrestling, jiu-jitsu is super technical, and to be really good on the ground takes a lot of years, where striking, if a guy is a natural sort of born fighter, as they'd say, they can pick it up pretty quickly. With regards to wrestling and jiu-jitsu, it takes a long period of time to get to a high level where you can go into a fight and compete against a black belt jiu-jitsu artist and actually stand a chance. Whereas if you're a white belt going into an MMA fight and you were to fight a higher level jiu-jitsu practitioner, you definitely don't want to go to the floor. And if you do, you're going to feel immediately that that's not where you're going to win the fight. And you'd probably end up tapping or losing.
Yeah. And your next fight now, all things considered and everything's open up and, now that we're in level 1, hopefully fights can go back on and, properly scheduling fights and hopefully getting in an audience. When will that be?
So I'd probably look at June, depending on what Golden Gloves wants and when their next event will be. They've got an event now with Lerena Liebenberg and Rowan Campbell. I think it's 14th of March. I think April they're going to have Kevin Lerena on the card. So possibly April, May, June, depending on what they want and depending on the circumstances, obviously, with regards to COVID.
And obviously you need to stay fighting fit because, 1 month's notice, you could be in the ring.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I train the way I do even out of camp. Sort of just keep my body in prime condition. And then once we get news of an upcoming fight, we start a camp. Whether it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is, and we sort of put our body through its paces. We get ready for the fight, and we study our opponents, etc. So it becomes quite scientific in that sense. There's obviously weight cut, that type of thing. So yeah, it's all part of the game.
And could you? Because obviously, let's say think about competing. Bodybuilding, if you get your pro card, you can go and then compete in any category.
Yeah.
With boxing, if you got your pro card in featherweight, can you make a change to any other category or?
Yeah, so you can obviously change weight divisions, which a lot of guys do. For example, they'll start their career at 18 years old and they'll be pretty light in that sense. But as they grow and they develop and they sort of become more mature in their bodies and in that sense, they go up in weight divisions like a Canelo, for example, 4-weight division champion, but started at, say, 66 or 69, and now he's fighting at 76.
Well, Kevin's going up a weight division.
The same with Kevin, and it will be with a lot of fighters. It's very difficult to constantly keep cutting weight, and I had the same with featherweight and lightweight. In the beginning of my career, I fought at featherweight, which is 66 kilos, but I was cutting 8 to 10 kilos for that fight, where after you sort of gain a little bit of experience, you realize that it's too much strain on your body. I'd rather fight at lightweights at 70 kilos and you only cut 5, for example. So yeah, I think weight cutting is a science of the sport, and if done incorrectly can hamper your performance in a really bad way. So yeah, you just got to be very smart with that, and I think a lot of guys now are starting to see that and fighting in heavier divisions.
I can imagine, you don't want to have to lose too much weight and, dehydrate yourself too much and, cut too much weight, because then also your power might not be there as much.
Yeah.
Whereas if you, let's say you want to try be just as heavy as possible for the weight division. You obviously want to be the heaviest for that weight division.
Yeah, so you take bodybuilding, for example, you cut the weight, you train as hard as you can, you eat as clean as you can, and you go onto stage and you don't need to perform in a sense. You've got to show what work you've put in your aesthetics.
So you can be dehydrated, whereas in boxing you can't.
You can be super dehydrated and super lean, where you don't have much energy. The guys can sort of hardly speak, and you'll see a lot of the guys will sort of binge eat afterwards, rehydrate really quickly. Whereas if you were to step into a ring or any other sports where it takes actual physical output, you don't want to be dehydrated. You want to be as hydrated as possible. Dehydration causes knockouts, clots, things like that, and that's when accidents happen, and guys can get seriously injured like that. So when it comes to weight cuts, in my personal opinion, I don't think it's good to cut a lot of weight, but you do obviously want the advantage where you are the biggest and heaviest in your division. So if I'm cutting from, let's say, 80 kilos to 70 kilos, by the next day when I step back in there, I should be between 75 and 77 kilos after having rehydrated and eaten as much as what I can, and sort of put on good quality weight, and not just bloat myself up with junk. But a lot of guys don't know that process or that science behind it, so they can end up hurting themselves, or they get in dehydrated, they don't perform at all, and they soon realize that that's not the division for them, and they go up in weight divisions.
You yourself, in terms of getting your mind right and resetting, because obviously you're owning a gym, training as a professional athlete, what do you do to maybe get your mind off fighting and, maybe a hobby or something?
So look, I've got a really great community at the gym, and we spend a lot of time together. We socialize together, so that's sort of my refresh and relaxing, sort of spending time with friends and family, that kind of thing. But also just challenging myself in different sports. So only just recently I tried my first sort of CrossFit workout at Motley Crue in 4 Ways, and I'm doing a fundraiser challenge at Pack Life Gym at District Fit where Apex is. So that type of thing, rock climbing, for example, or hiking or trail running, something different, something a little bit challenging where you a newbie, you're the new guy on the block, and you just got to try and sort of test yourself and see where you go.
And it's interesting as a top tier athlete, going into another aspect of fitness, obviously not having any background in it, going into and still being so far superior than the general public. Like, it's interesting to see how, being an athlete in certain aspect can, kind of just mix into other aspects.
Yeah, I think also with the strength and conditioning that we put in, it's very similar to a lot of different, a lot of movements in, say, for example, CrossFit or other sports. And we sort of push ourselves where we are uncomfortable. That's sort of a mental challenge for us. And it's also nice to be humbled and walk into a place where you're not at the top anymore, and you're not the big fish in the tank anymore. You're the small fish in the tank, and I think that's important. Most guys need to do that and should do that for their character and for just a little bit of sort of character building.
And during lockdown, I assume that obviously also built character, because it showed people, your fights are cancelled, gyms closed. Obviously, how did your training change? Obviously, you having the gym, I assumed you could go in there, but also you moved.
Yeah, so we had moved, so the gym was still being renovated, but I had a bit of time before lockdown, so I set up quite a nice sort of training spot at my place. And if I'm being honest, I probably trained harder in lockdown just purely because I had the time. There was no sort of training clients or running classes, doing different sessions at different places. I could put together my own program and do things that I kind of neglected because I just didn't have the time for it. So it was really nice for me to sort of reset myself and just get my body back into condition the way I wanted to do it.
Yeah. Bro, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So for the people maybe interested, where is your gym so they can come check you out?
So we're in Parkmore in Sandton, the corner of Olympia and 11th Avenue. It's called District Fit, the actual facility, and we've got a couple of gyms inside with different sort of energies and vibes, so it's quite cool. So yeah, if guys want to come through, they're more than welcome.
Awesome. Bro, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. Cheers.